And hi, everybody. Welcome to the Good Book Club. It is August 10th. It's 11 a.m.-ish. We kind of were chatting a little bit before we got started. And we are really excited to dive into our book today, which is We Have No Idea, A Guide to the Unknown Universe with our discussion leader, Yvonne. I always start out each meeting by reading our mission statement. We've been doing this for 5 years now. It's pretty incredible. And this mission statement has really kind of guided the books that we choose and how we kind of conduct ourselves and have our discussions. So the Good Book Club mission statement, the Good Book Club was created to bring together nuanced Mormons, post-Mormons, and others with a shared interest in Mormonism. We are introspective, critical thinkers seeking to learn, connect, and build relationships through the catalyst of literature. We welcome all who are searching for a safe space to share authentic thoughts, feelings, and ideas through open dialogue and shared experiences relative to Mormon culture. As we deconstruct previous beliefs, we encourage all to find happiness in the process of discovering new religious ideologies, spirituality, and life philosophies. Love our mission statement. We have a few things that we're going to go into very quickly before we start. This is amazing. As I mentioned before, happy 5th birthday, the Good Book Club, 5 years. This is pretty incredible because we have done it every month, 11 a.m. For all this time. I don't know if somebody wants to add 5 times 12. Yeah, we're looking at 60. Amazing. And I think a lot of us have all these books, that we've been reading. We still have some of our OG members with us who have been with us for 5 years. So congratulations to everybody, because the Good Book Club is all about all of you. It's crowd led, and we're really excited. Sunstone, just a little, we love how Melissa, the person who puts together all our slides and holds us together, puts pictures up. Several of us from the Good Book Club were at Sunstone. Here's a couple pictures, Sandra Tanner, and out to dinner with, Radio Free Mormon, Bill Reel, Randy. What's Randy's last name? No, I can't remember.
Oh,
I know. Boy, thank you, Bruce. Yeah, I'm losing it this morning. So Matt Harris, who's going to be one of our authors that we're going to read in the new season. And I found the golden plates. So it was a really fun experience. And again, it happens every year, that last weekend in July. So as Melissa says, plan now, right? 2026. So that was really fun. Let's see what else we have going on very quickly. We are going to talk about some changes in September. It seems like anytime a corporation reaches 5 years, they're like, let's talk about this and see if we can do things better. We are, and this is based on a lot of public feedback, going to move our meetings to 10 a.m. Mountain Time. We feel like hopefully that won't be too early for people on the Pacific time, and it'll really help the people that are on Central and East, because it's kind of right smack in the middle of the day. So we'll be starting at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. That will begin next month in September. And I'll put out all kinds of notices and emails about this to make sure we all know. We're also going to try to sort of condense things a little bit and have our discussions shoot for more. And again, this is all loose, an hour and a half. So 10 to 11:30 discussion, and then 11:30 to 12 our mix and mingle for those that want to stay. That way it's kind of a 2-hour block. Look, we're following Mormonism in the morning, and people have the freedom to do what they would like for the rest of their Sundays. Again, this is loose because sometimes we get talking, but for those of you that are discussion leaders, we're shooting for about an hour and a half discussion and then a half an hour mix and mingle after that. So we'll see what happens. Who knows? I talk a lot. I may not be able to make that 2-hour block. We have our book list out for 2025, 2026. If you're on our Facebook page, it's pinned under the featured tab. If you receive information via email, I always email this out, but you can kind of look and see through here. Take a screenshot right now if you want, so that you can go back and revisit, but the information is out there on Facebook and through email. And there are a couple slots that we still need discussion leaders for. I think that's our next slide after. Yeah, thank you, Melissa, for pausing. There we go. We still need somebody to tackle on March 8th, how the female body drove 200 million years of human evolution. This is available on audio. It's a little bit of a longer book, but looks really interesting. Bruce is going to put these books that we still need discussion leaders for in the chat. And June 14th, The True Believer, Thoughts on the Nature of Mass Movements. And this is a favorite book of John DeLynn, if that motivates anybody to try to tackle it. But if any of these reach out and grab you, throw it up in the chat, message me, put it on Facebook, just get a hold of us and tell us that you'd like to lead the discussion, because we have a lot of fun doing that. We really like to work closely with our discussion leaders. Upcoming events, really quickly. let's see, what do we have? There's a couple reading opportunities here. We've talked about Joseph Smith, The Architecture of Mormonism. This is a topical biography by Ganesh Sharian. Absolutely, it's taking everything by fire. It's been incredible. We heard him talk about it at Sunstone. Shattered Trust, a book by our friend and book club member Lila Tuller, where she curated stories of religious trauma and abuse and kind of put those together. Both of these are on Amazon. And a new book, this is brand new since we talked last time, Devout by David Archuleta. I think most of us has followed his story. I did since he was on American Idol, right? All those years ago, but it's been pretty incredible. And I think this is going to be good. You can pre-order it. I know some of our book club members have already pre-ordered it. And I don't know, maybe I'll reach out, see if you might pop in and talk to us if enough of us read it. So that's a recommendation there. And next month, I want to make sure we know about this. This is September 14th. The author, Laura Lee Hall, is going to join us. This is Dictates of Conscience. Landon and I are going to be the discussion leaders. We've had the chance to interview her several times and have read the book. But like I said, it'll be more kind of a Q&A with her because she'll be here. So it won't be, like a discussion with us leading a discussion. The author's here. So she'll be able to field a lot of questions and you'll be able to, talk to her. So if you know anybody that doesn't normally come to book club or isn't even aware of book club, but would be interested, one-on-one here with Laura Lee Hall, please spread the word, the gospel, and tell everybody about this meeting. Again, it'll be 10 a.m. Thank you for the red lettering, Melissa, on September 14th. So this will be exciting to look forward to. And I think with that, we are on to our book for this month, which we're so excited. Yvonne, who took two books this year. She's amazing. We Have No Idea, A Guide to the Unknown Universe. We're going to turn it all over to Yvonne now. It's going to be great.
Okay, should we get the slides up there?
Yeah, let's do it.
Start. So I think I didn't do two in 1 year, Rebecca. That would be
I
way
thought that
too
you
ambitious.
did.
I did. Moral Landscape was last year.
Was it? Because I swear we had you on Mormonish this year. That's interesting.
Well, I did the Mormon Landscape one. I mean the Moral Landscape. Yeah. Anyway, here we go. So we have no idea. Go to the next slide, and this is just kind of my introductory. Yeah, next slide, Melissa. So I was Zooming a stake conference, and it was after I kind of left the church, and our stake president, who's younger than I am, and he's a MBA professor, lecturer all over the place, really kind of good, famous young guy, good speaker. And his address to the members of our stake was this like diatribe against science and how the gospel is, wait, we're on the wrong slide. Go back. There. Yeah, there's the Mormon priesthood leader. And how, we can't rely on science. It's just theories, blah, blah, blah. And of course, he bore his testimony at the end that we have this unchanging gospel and things are, the truth is unchanging. And then I put a little blurb at the bottom about, well, except for all the other truths that we keep changing in our church. But I was really dismayed that someone like that would, I just kept thinking in my mind, is this something that the members of our stake really need to hear? That science is not good, given climate change and COVID and many members of our stake are actually founders of MLM companies like Herbalife and Tahitian noni juice and all these other snake oils. It was just, to me, it was bad. Anyway, let's go on and learn some science, even though we don't really have an idea we don't have a certain idea, but it's allowed us to progress. Okay, so these are just a couple of slides about our authors, Daniel Whiteson, and he's a particle physicist, and that's why when he talks about that, he's got his cred. And the next slide is about the cartoonist, Jorge Cham. He's actually from Panama and has done a lot of fun cartoons. I don't know how many of you listened to it or read it, but for me, one of the most delightful things was looking at the funny cartoons that he drew. And I just kept thinking, if only I'd had this physics textbook when I was when I was in high school, it would have been fun. I would have really enjoyed it. Okay, next slide. So we're only going to talk about the first 6 chapters. There's 17 chapters, and you don't have to read them in order, I don't think. You can just dive in and out, but we're just going to talk about the first six. And I have to just tell you how my Mormon conditioned mind works. When they talked about all these things like what is dark matter and how we didn't know, I'd think, is dark matter God? I mean, that's what my mind did to me. What is dark energy? Is is dark energy God? Because it's that whole thing of the God of the gaps thing that I had to remind myself that that's what humanity's been doing forever. And then gravity is so mysterious. Maybe gravity is God. Anyway, go to the next slide. Okay. Um, and I'm kind of dominating this discussion right now, but we're going to get into talking. But uh, the thing that blew my mind is that well, first they talked about I didn't know I didn't have physics for 50 years probably, but that we do know what the most basic elements of matter are made of, and that everything we have ever seen, touched, smelled, or stubbed our toes on is really just three different building blocks. They're up quarks, down quarks, and electrons. And with those three particles, you can build anything in the universe. And but even beyond that, in this century, I guess, particle physicists have discovered nine more matter particles and five particles that transmit forces. Why do we have them? What are they for? And I made an acronym for what they keep saying in the book, which is kind of funny, WHNI, which stands for we have no idea. We have no idea about. Okay, next slide, Melissa. In fact, if the universe were a pie chart, it says we need only three particles to build stars, planets, comets, and pickles, but it turns out that these things make only a tiny fraction of the universe. 5% is all that we really know about. 27% is dark matter, which we kind of know, and the other 68%, they call it dark energy now. But the rest of it, we really have no idea. No, next slide. Okay. Oh, I think I can't see the top of the slide. Can I move it down? Anyway, can you see it? I think it's supposed to say just because it's dark doesn't mean it doesn't matter. Can you see that on the top? Anyway,
Yes.
okay, because I can't see that. But this is what we do know about dark matter, that it has mass. And we'll talk about how we know that. It's invisible. We can't see it with our senses. It likes to hang out with galaxies, and regular matter can't seem to touch it. And other dark matter can't seem to touch it either. And how did we discover this? And it was by observing galaxies. And when we observed galaxies, we noticed that they were spinning so fast that all the planets and stuff and solar systems would have spun out into outer darkness, I guess, outer space, unless there was some mass that was holding them together. Next slide. There's a kind of graphic of it that you can that it's spinning so fast that they wouldn't have been able to hold together. And a second way they found out was by gravitational lensing, which means that light bend, and another one is colliding galaxies. I'm not going to talk about that, but we are going to talk about, next slide, because I'm a feminist, about one of the pioneers in discovering dark matter, and it was this woman named Vera C. Rubin. And she's in the news, at least her observatory is in the news just recently, just in June 2025. Her observatory in Chile, I mean, the one that's named after her, came online. She's since died. But of course, she encountered a lot of hardship just because she was a woman. She developed an so this is a little bit about Vera Rubin. We're going to learn about this woman who was overlooked and didn't get credit in her lifetime as much as the men around her did. Anyway, she had an early fascination with the night sky and earned her bachelor's degree in astronomy. And it was a rare achievement for a woman at the time. But despite graduating near the top of her class, she was rejected from Princeton's graduate astronomy program, which didn't admit women until 1975. I mean, that's in a lot in my lifetime for sure. But undeterred, she pursued her master's at Cornell and eventually got her PhD at Georgetown, where she was often the only woman in the room and sometimes not welcome in the room at all. But Rubin persevered and made landmark contributions to galactic astronomy. Most notably, her studies of spiral galaxies revealed that stars were moving too quickly to be explained by visible matter alone, providing compelling evidence for dark matter, a mysterious component that makes up 27% of the universe. Her work fundamentally shifted astrophysics and remains central to the field today. But beyond her scientific achievements, Rubin was a fierce advocate for gender equality. She once famously said, "There is no problem in science that can be solved by a man that cannot also be solved by a woman." And she mentored countless women. But one of her proudest accomplishments, I liked this, was raising her 4 children, all of whom went on to earn PhDs in the sciences. She saw her role as a mother and a mentor as an extension of her scientific legacy. In honor of her contributions, the Vera Rubin Observatory bears her name, ensuring that future generations of astronomers of all genders can look to the stars. Okay, next slide. And because I'm a grandma first, I had to talk about Vera C. Harrell. This is my granddaughter, and she is a miracle of science. And she was born at 24 weeks, weighing only 1.5 pounds. And the only reason we got her is because my daughter-in-law had 3 rounds of IVF, and her first pregnancy that resulted after 3 rounds of IVF ended in a fetus being born at 20 weeks. So Vera was actually, and of course didn't make it. Vera was her second try. She had 4 major surgeries, and you see her here holding her sister, her little sister Olive. And Olive was born from the same batch of fertilized embryo 10 years later. She's 10 years younger than Vera. And Danielle, just my daughter-in-law, she couldn't get rid of that last lonely embryo. You know, she just didn't want to just chuck it. But you have to pay. They've been paying for 10 years to store this little embryo. And so even though all of her other pregnancies, she had to have at least 3 rounds of IVF, she said, well, let's just go ahead and implant this little embryo. And it ended up being Olive. And she would joke that Vera and Olive are actually twins. So this is when Vera's 10 and Olive's a baby. Vera's 15 now, and she runs cross country and track for her school in Belmont, Michigan, which is a miracle, really, because she was a lung baby. She, the lungs develop last, and the fact that she can do that. Miracles of science. Okay.
Yvonne,
Indulging the grandma. Yeah.
you said they're twins, so
Well,
they're gonna
that's what their mom Danielle calls them. They're not, but they're born from the same batch of embryos 10 years apart, right?
Okay,
Chosen
okay,
at
so
the
they're
same
not
time.
So
identical
she
twins
says,
10 years apart. That would
No,
really
they're
be
different. They're
interesting.
different little embryos, but Danielle likes to tease Vera and say, well, Olive's your twin. And Vera was just at that age when she was 10 that she found babies so adorable. So she just loved little Olive. Okay, I could go on and on. Moving
No,
on.
that's interesting because it's a whole Mormon thing where, freezing embryos, people using embryos from somebody else, and
Yeah.
it's a whole, like you said, science brings up all these religious questions.
Yes. Bruce.
Yeah, I have a question because I have a TBM who technically she is a great niece who I know has been a surrogate twice. She's had
Mm.
like 5 or 6 of her own kids and then has been a surrogate twice. And I'm sure they did it for the money.
Wow.
And what is I've never broached this because I'm not going to go like at a family get together where I'm taking them out to dinner. Like, well, how do you know, reconcile that with Mormon teaching on surrogacy? What is Mormon teaching
Well,
on surrogacy?
I'll tell you
Landon, do
something
you know?
interesting. I
Go
know.
ahead.
If you don't know, Landon, I do.
Oh, No,
Landon, go ahead.
I thought they were against it. I have known a couple LDS women who were surrogate mothers, but I thought they were against it, but I
Well,
don't
they're
know the
against
official.
it, but here's what's interesting. So a couple, a husband, wife, married, create an embryo, right? Now, if the woman were to carry the baby and it was born in the covenant, it's born in the covenant. If you use a surrogate, that embryo, even though genetically it belongs to a husband and wife sealed in the temple, you have to have the baby sealed to you. So the church doesn't recognize genetic material. It recognizes the body that it comes out of, which is so short-sighted, I think, because that baby is 100% genetically, belongs to the sealed couple. The surrogate, it's just simply like a medical procedure, a medical process. So I think that's interesting that that's their stance on it. It would have to be resealed. It would have to be sealed to the couple.
Interesting. I didn't know that. I don't know anything about it either.
It's a weird area, but
Except I
think
do
it's
know, I think
increasing.
that it's kind of an individual thing, or Bishop Roulette or whatever, because my daughter has friends of hers who have never carried their own babies, and they're active in the church, but they've gotten them through surrogacy. I don't know if they had to, maybe they don't even tell. I don't know. Anyway, Jackie, I guess, or Landon, did you have another comment, Landon?
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, and I don't know the answer to this, but and I don't know if your daughter was an active member or what, and
Yes,
how
she is.
that
They
played
still are.
into.
Yes, she is.
They
They
are.
still are.
So if you get rid of an egg that you've been storing and you get rid of that, is that considered an abortion by the
Yeah.
church? If could be a feasible person, it brings up all these ethical questions that the church has no real answers for. And again, that's why once you get out of the church and you look back at it, you just go, well, it's a fertilized egg that's not going to have, and if you get rid of it, it never was anything. But in the church, it raises all kinds of moral questions as to whether it's ethical or not to get rid of that if you believe it's abortion is, when they get fertilized. So
And that's true. That might have been why my daughter-in-law just couldn't let it go. I know my son is in the bishopric back there in Belmont, Massachusetts. But so they're active in everything. But I don't think they ever considered like asking for permission to do those things. I think they just, we want to have kids and we're going to do it. Jackie, you had a
Unmute.
There we go. So I was just gonna say, yeah, I never made it to the IVF thing, but it was a concern of mine because I had my children via immaculate conception. They're in vitro, not in vitro, excuse me. They're insemination. So that was a concern, but that wasn't what got us disfellowshipped. In fact, they never said anything about that, even though that, because I had those kids, quote unquote, out of wedlock and via artificial insemination. So that was the step below. And we were considering IVF if we weren't able to, because I was having trouble with our first one. So it's just kind of weird. The church is all about family, family, family. But then if you can't do it the way they want you to, it's like science isn't real and they put all these artificial roadblocks in your way.
They do good comment. Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy.
Oops.
Bruce, I guess.
Yeah, to kind of probably our last of our IVF discussion, I was listening to somebody talk about the Southern Baptists and stuff, and they struggle with IVF because there's been discussion, outlawing abortion, but also some of the religious right are talking about outlawing IVF and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So some of this, controlling women's fertility, I think, is an interesting way, controlling women's bodies in all aspects, women's participation in society and stuff. Yeah. So that just my thought.
Exactly. Yes. Which is a whole different topic, but one dear to my heart too. Suppression of women. Okay, Rebecca.
I would just one last thing. I did have to look it up. So yeah, they definitely they used to say, don't do any of these things, but now, of course, the idea is that having a family is the most important thing. So it is more roulette, don't ask, don't tell. But you do, they say, highly encouraged just to use, your own genetic material. Like it would be a whole different thing if a woman went out and used somebody else's genetic material that was not the husband, which is so interesting because infertility, those are the options that allow you to have a family. So I agree with Landon. These are moral questions. On one side, the church is like, have a family, but then they want to control all this other, and they seem to like wrap some kind of weird immorality thing into it. I'm sorry, going to a sperm bank and getting artificially inseminated, that has nothing to do with a morality, as they will. So I think we'll see more of this. It's kind of interesting. So bring this up, Yvonne. This is good. This is the kind of stuff where science and religion butt heads, and it can just get crazy unless you step away and go, we don't need to deal with that anymore.
And it changes, and we eventually we go with science, usually. I mean, it's kind of cool. Anyway, let's move on to, this is chapter 3, dark energy. And I just have to say, so the biggest chunk of reality, 68%, is what physicists are calling dark energy. We have almost no idea what it is. We just know that it's causing the universe to expand very rapidly. And back to the religious thing is my mind is always thinking, so maybe dark energy is God, maybe dark matter is God. Next slide, Melissa. And that's just how our minds work, but it's not going to get us anywhere if we've only progressed because of science. This is just a slide that I thought was a cute cartoon that explained like what it actually means for an expanding universe, that all the matrix, and in later chapters they do talk about space being actually more like a goo, if you read the chapter on space. And so here they liken it to like a rising piece of raisin bread, a loaf of raisin bread, and it expands and expands, but the raisins stay the same. To know the fate of the universe, you want to know whether this expansion is changing. Are other galaxies moving away from us more slowly now, or are they moving more quickly? And now, when I was in physics, the model was, they did have the Big Bang back then, but what they would predict was that it would slow down, that this initial bang would slow down, and then the universe would like contract again, and it would be like this cycle. But when they got more powerful telescopes and everything, observatories, they found, and in other ways, that it actually is expanding, and in fact, it's going faster and faster. The galaxies and the stars and everything is moving faster and faster away from us. What could that mean? Let's go to the next slide. Kind of crazy. The reason that we know, this is the reason that we know that it is expanding faster, and also what the pattern of the universe is, and it's from this cosmic microwave background photo. In the book, they call it a photo of the baby universe, of what the universe looked like just after it exploded into existence, I guess. And I had to include one of my grandbabies in the picture because they talk about how cute the baby universe was. Look at it, but not as cute as my grandbaby. Sorry. Okay, next slide. They used this background to measure how much dark matter and dark energy there is. And another way they measured the dark energy is looking at the rate of expansion using, I can't explain this physics stuff. If anybody can, raise your hand, because I really can't. But I read this book and it made me feel like I at least understood it. So there was 3 ways that they were able to measure the expansion of the universe and the makeup of the universe. And all 3 methods agreed that the measurements of our universe are 5, 27, 28. Just like your 3 measurements on your body. That's what I liken it to. But I can remember that. 5% stuff we know about, 27% dark matter, we know a little bit about it, 68%, we have no idea. Okay, but it's what's making the universe bigger, and we know it's making it bigger. Okay, next slide. This is the third way, a depiction of the third way of how we know what the universe looks like. And the formation of the galaxies and the solar systems and the stars and everything, it wouldn't look the way it looks now if it hadn't been that 52768. Okay, the pie chart is accurate. And so this is chapter 4. We're moving rapidly through the chapters, and then we can get into discussion. So now we're only talking about that 5% of our entire universe that we really hope we understand a little bit more. What are the basic elements of matter? So were they talking about the 3 particles, the up quarks, the down quarks, and the electrons, and combined that can make any kind of atom? And we know how atoms are used to make molecules, and we know how molecules can form complex objects like cakes and elephants. But all of that is just the how. We know how things go together. We know how to put them together. We know this so well that we can make everything from sweat wicking underwear to space telescopes. But we don't know very much about why. Why are things the way they are? And why aren't they in any other version of the 10 to 500th different versions of the universe, the multiverse, as proposed by string theorists? The why. I don't know. Anybody have any ideas? Next slide. And the other thing we don't know about is that we have these other particles of matter. And this underneath them, they had just had the little letters in the diagram, but I thought, what do they mean? But it's the up, down, charm, strange, weird names, top, bottom. Those are quarks or quarks. I think you pronounce it like an or quarks. And the other ones are the leptons, the electron, the VE, the VM, the VT, the muon, and the tau. That's what they named them. Yet we only need 3 of those 12 to make everything around you. Okay. What are the 9 other particles for? We don't know. We have no idea. Does anybody know how atoms and neutrons and all? Do you think you could make them? I don't know how they do it, but it did make me understand stuff about like atom bombs and things, how they were able to get the energy to split the atom. Let's go to the next slide. After a century of smashing things around, physicists have found that the 12 fundamental matter particles can be arranged in a table. And the authors explain that tables are significant because when they're missing an element in a table, they can go look for it. And that's how they postulated that there must be a Higgs boson particle. Good, yeah, good. And the Higgs field, and that's how they found it. These are the force chart carrier particles, and they knew because of the chart that there must be some kind of particle to react, to do the force reactions, and it must be the Higgs. It must be there, and so that's how they discovered it through those. And they do a lot of fun little shout outs to Star Wars, right? The force particle of the midichlorians, remember? Does anybody know that from Star Wars? Yes. Okay, next slide. That carries the force. We prefer the term temporarily unemployed, say the particle is. Okay, there might be more particles, is what this slide says. We haven't really reached a fundamental understanding of why things are the way they are, and that's why there's the list we have discovered now, but we're not sure that we have the full list of elemental particles in the universe. Okay, next slide.
I have a theory.
Okay, let's hear it.
I think that the useless particles are the children of the productive particles.
I don't get it. What? They're the
It's a dad
Landon,
joke.
it's a dad
It's a
joke.
dad joke.
Yeah, I'm sure your kids are not useless. Maybe we think
Well,
about that sometime. All right. Okay, chapter 5, the mysteries of mass, and that we are mostly empty space, This is so crazy to me that they started measuring that atoms, the atoms we are all made of have most of their stuff, and it's in quotes because they might not be particles, they might be more waves concentrated into a tiny nucleus surrounded by a lot of empty space. But mass is not just the sum of all the matter in the stuff, it also includes the energy that holds that stuff together. And that most of the mass of a little proton or a neutron that we're all made of, that atoms are all made of, most of the mass, this is what made me understand like how you could split an atom and have an atom bomb, comes not from the quarks, but from the energy that's binding them together. Next slide. In fact, they found out that only 1% of the mass of a proton comes from the quarks, and 99% is the binding energy that holds it together. Isn't that crazy? So now don't you kind of figure you understand? Cameron, good.
Oh,
Help me out
you
here.
complete your sentence. No, you're doing great, by the way, Yvonne. Appreciate this. Yeah, this one was kind of mind-blowing to me too. I actually have read a lot of physics books over the years. I love Brian Greene and Sean Carroll and Neil deGrasse Tyson, and skeptics are a big influence on me and my just thoughts post my religious kind of deconstruction and reconstruction. But yeah, there's so much here about that just blows my mind. The idea that pretty much everything is not, there's no substance to it. Even the mass of these protons, it's not substance, it's energy. And I mean that, like, this book actually made me think a little bit more strongly about the whole idea that we're in a matrix, maybe potentially, or like a simulated universe rather than a real one. And I've always thought that was kind of a weird concept before, but this book made me, I'm rethinking that again. But it's fascinating. And oh, one other thing I was just going to mention on the expansion of the universe, you guys, if you follow like social media and stuff, ever since the James Webb Telescope came out, there's a lot of misinformation out there, so you have to kind of be careful about it.
Mhm.
But a lot of physicists and stuff are noticing some of the observations from James Webb. They're having to reconsider some things. And one of the things they're reconsidering is the expansion rate of the universe. And maybe it's not expanding as much as they thought. And there's some physicists that thinks it may be collapsing instead of expanding. So there's a lot we're learning. There's so many things we don't know. This book subject, we just don't know it. That's the most correct statement about the book, I think. So
That's probably true. Thank you. And it is true that this book, I think it was 2017, I think the first edition.
mhm.
So,
Yeah.
it's going to be changing. Yeah, I didn't know that, but I do know. I sometimes get that on my feed, and the only thing I wonder about is are all those gorgeous images? Do they really look like that? You've seen that they get from the James Wood. Is that what it really looks like, or are they are they CGIing that so it looks pretty cool? I don't know.
Well, they
Okay,
have
Bruce.
to color them because it's not a visible light for humans. It's
Yeah,
infrared light. So they are
exactly.
coloring it. But yes,
They think that's what if they,
they're giving us a representation for what it would look like if we could see
if
those
we could
wavelengths.
see
We
it,
can't
yeah,
see those wavelengths. So they have to make
right.
up, but it's gradients of the wavelengths. Does that make sense? So it's still differentiations, but it's the colors that we can see in our eyes. So
Yeah,
anyway.
that is crazy. Thank you for explaining that too. I mean, it just is one more of the mysteries of our universe, isn't it? I hope we're not living in a simulation, though. But it might, Bruce.
Yeah, no, along these lines, it's really interesting. Karin and I have pretty good friends. Um, Michael Werner and Jocelyn Keene are friends, and Michael and Jocelyn ran the infrared telescope for NASA out of Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and they were with Caltech. And you know, a lot of our friends are astrophysicists who, they're retired now. But the one that I don't know, this always makes me feel good is that, and I've never met him. I assume he lives around here someplace, is Kip Thorne. He was born in Logan. He was raised Mormon. He's an atheist. And in 2017, he won the Nobel Prize in Physics for detecting gravitational waves when two black holes merge. And they talk about that in the book with the two right angle sensors far apart. And I really enjoy finding out about gay scientists that have helped the world. And I really enjoy finding out about ex-Mormons who have helped science and helped the world understand, because, those are two things that, I relate to. And so, yeah, it's very interesting that,
It
when
is.
I was listening to it, and I followed him just because when he got the Nobel Prize, I read about it and stuff because it was kind of local news here.
Yeah. And it is interesting. And yeah, you promote your demographic and I promote mine. I
Mhm.
like to read about women
Yeah,
in
no,
science. But yeah, for sure. Let's keep it going. Go, Bruce. Okay. Next slide. Okay, and so this is the last chapter, but then we can talk. Gravity is different, and I didn't know before how little we know about gravity, how strange it is, that it's weirdly weak. And they talked about the experiment of how you know that by picking up a little nail with a magnet, and that tiny little magnet can overcome the whole gravity of an entire planet, and that it only pulls, it never pushes apart, it only pulls together. And it doesn't fit the theory of quantum mechanics. That's why they're trying to make you hear about that theory of everything that they're always pursuing. And it's because quantum mechanics or quantum theory doesn't doesn't mesh with the theory of the general relativity theory of gravity. But that's been a great theory. It's allowed us to do a lot of make a lot of progress, right? But I didn't know this either, that Einstein didn't look at gravity as a force between two objects, which is how I've always understood it. A satellite stays around the orbit of the Earth because of the gravity, but it isn't the force pulling it in, it's the distortion of space itself. Next slide. That's how Einstein looked at gravity, that gravity was, or space is this plane of existence or something, and gravity distorts it so that things orbit the way they do. So that's one theory, or that it's mediated by quantum gravitons, that there's this particle called a graviton that we haven't discovered yet. That would make it all fit into the theory of the quantum theory, or because he has to throw in his fun little things. That we really do live in a simulation, and it's just the warm embrace of the giant spaghetti monster. Okay, next slide.
Okay, I found this on the
Oops.
web for are you supposed
Okay.
to throw in the little things that
Oops.
we do live in a simulation, and it's just a warm embrace of that.
Did you hear that? My
Yeah.
Alexa's not telling me about. Did I say Alexa? Anyway, okay, Cameron, go ahead.
Oh,
That's why
yeah,
we're in a
just
simulation, because your Alexa can answer you at every minute.
yeah, that is true. It's true, Rebecca. It's awesome. Oh, I was just gonna make a comment on the quantum gravitons versus distortion thing, because even though I've read a lot
Yeah,
of
this is
physics
it.
books,
My phone.
this book was really helpful for me understanding quantum gravitons a little bit more. But I also wondered, is it possible that both are true or that neither are true? But in the sense that they've learned that light is both a particle and a wave at the same time, and that there's evidence for both things being true simultaneously. I wondered if this is another example of another weird paradox like that, with gravity and just so much we don't know. And by the way, I love Interstellar. It's one of my favorite movies, so I'm looking forward to this next slide.
Okay, so then you're the one to explain it. I was going to put this up and say, so this movie made me think about gravity in a whole different way. And so tell us a quick plot of Interstellar, Cameron.
Oh my gosh. Okay, thanks. I
What does gravity have to do with it? Go ahead.
well, I guess spoiler alert. Sorry, spoiler alert. Yeah, it's a movie about traveling through space, and it's about so much more. It's about relationships. But anyway, they find a wormhole and go through a wormhole to try and find another planet to populate because our planet's getting wasted. And it's all about gravity in the sense that there is one of the planets that they visit that's close to a black hole. And on that planet, it is so close to the black hole that it distorts time and space because time and space are connected together. And so, like 1 second of time on this planet is like I don't know, days worth of time on Earth. And so they go down to the planet, and time is flying by on the spaceship that's orbiting the planet. And then yeah, years and years pass, and even though they were only down there for like an hour or something, anyway, it's really cool. And there is a book called The Science of Interstellar for any science nerds. It came out after the movie. The movie was written by Christopher Nolan, he and his brother, and they love science a lot, and they made sure that they had science consultation on the movie before they did it. And so they actually did a really cool thing with the all the scenes about the black hole. They didn't know what a black hole would look like, really. They had theories. But they put like massive amounts of data into, supercomputers to help them render what the black hole would look like. And then it was just a couple years later when we finally got images of the first black hole ever imaged by Earth, and it was very, very similar to the images in Interstellar. So it's an awe-inspiring movie, but it's just so fascinating. And I actually cried when I first watched it. It's a spiritual experience for me, some of the science stuff. So it's really cool.
It is cool. Thank you. And I cried too. But and I had read that about the depictions of the black hole. But in the book, you notice that they say we could maybe figure out gravity if we could travel into a black hole. Did you catch that in the book? And Matthew McConaughey does go through a black hole. He doesn't figure it out, but he has a robot with him. Is it Slick? Is that the robot's name? I can't remember.
No, it's TARS.
TARS, that's what he calls them. Yeah, TARS. Anyway, and the robot figures it out and is able to somehow, because they're in this, time warp dimension, they communicate that to Matthew McConaughey's daughter back on Earth. I'm really spoiling it now. And she figures out gravity. And that's what allows the Earth civilization to survive, because they can overcome gravity. And so they all live, when he comes back, in what is it, like an orbiting thing around the Earth, because they had to leave the planet. Anyway, it's good. Cameron did it better. Next slide. If you want to know about gravity or have interesting thoughts about it, go see Interstellar. Okay, so now we're done. At least I am, with trying to to help you understand what we have no idea about. But I did really love that book. I wanted to recommend it and give it to your teenager, right? Give it to somebody that, like me, that's a humanities major and doesn't really understand science but wants to, because it's so fun and cheerful and understandable. I really enjoyed it. So this is where we discuss, has our LDS religious understanding of the universe increased, decreased, or stayed the same in just the last few decades? I'm not talking, well, I guess I am talking about, because we haven't been around for only a few decades, right? Mormonism. But we did have, at least we did. Now I'm giving it away. Let's go ahead with the hands. Was it Landon first or Bruce first? Who was first? Bruce?
Yeah. Well, basically, over the years with, Joseph Smith and Brigham Young, I mean, who was the one that said that there's Quakers, people dressed like Quakers on the moon, and stuff. And
You misunderstood, Bruce. It's quarks. There were quarks on the moon.
oh, okay.
Not
But
He was
Quakers,
prophetic.
not Quarkers. They were good one, Landon.
Yeah. But the narrative of behavioral control, money control, and sexual control used by the Mormon Church and other religions, when they make up stories that kind of appease people and get people to give up their autonomy, give up their sexual autonomy, and give up their financial autonomy, when it butts up against science, then you're going like, okay, then maybe what they're saying is not true. And yeah, it's just, I had posed in the question earlier, if you went to BYU or a BYU, did you run up against this? I never did, because I studied marketing, accounting, and Spanish. Those things are pretty far from the science. My one physics class was physics of light, and it was black and white photography, which I I did for many years. But how do you reconcile the myths and stories of LDS religious tradition with ever expanding science understanding? Just my thought.
Thank you, Bruce. Landon.
I think that it's really exposed the fact that you can when you don't before you have science, you can make up anything and say anything, and uh, people will believe it. And I think people will still continue to believe it even after it's been proven false if they believe enough. But I think it really blurred the church, where Joseph said, "Oh, Kolob, it's just over there behind the sun," and then what is it, Shiz, Flim, all the different planets that he named. Uh, I think it was who was it who said we'd never walk on the moon? One of the prophets said that. So it's completely exposing that you can just make stuff up, and a long time ago that couldn't be proven. In 1800 you could say that kind of stuff and get away with it, but now you can't. And that's why you see the church being much, much more careful on anything they say about anything, because they've been exposed so much by these things that now they say nothing. They just say we don't really know. That hasn't been revealed to us. It used to be everything had been revealed to us. Now it seems like practically nothing has been revealed to us, because what they revealed comes to bite them in the butt when they say something about it.
Yeah, that was exactly my point in this slide, is that we really have gotten to where we stay away from those topics completely. And I guess, given that I celebrate the book, I shouldn't be upset with the church if they keep saying we have no idea. I just wish they would say we have no idea about things that matter, about, like, anyway, things that matter to us as humans. Okay, Rebecca.
Well, I think the reason we can still be upset is because while they say we don't know, they let many organizations go unchecked that say we do know, like a Scripture Central or a Jasmine Rapoli or a Book of Mormon Central, where they can say all kinds of crazy stuff. In fact, it used to be in their mission statement at Book of Mormon Central, we go to the places the church can't. We take the risks, insert with shoddy scholarship, and the church never, the Book of Mormon Central says they found Lehi's house, right? You're not going to hear that from Conference, but the church also supports it and doesn't stop them from saying that kind of stuff. But my comment on, understanding the universe and science, such a difference than when we were all kids, right? We know so much more if you're paying attention. And it's so interesting to me because when I do pay attention and all these amazing things come out, it makes me say, of course, there's no need for God in all of this. It reaffirms my belief in the fact that there is nothing supernatural like that. It's science. I don't understand, maybe some of you can weigh in, why some people say this reaffirms my belief in the existence of God. You could read a book like this and say, oh, this completely proves God. I don't understand that, because as I learn and study and all these wonderful things happening, it just makes me realize, it's the universe, it's science, it's, things we can't quite comprehend, but it's certainly not a deity. So I don't know if any of you guys have any answers to that, but some people double down the more these discoveries come out and say it has to be God. Somebody had to stir that pot in the beginning where everything else is pointing to not so much.
Yeah, I agree. Cameron.
Yeah, so I think there's mixed evidence on this particular issue. I do think the church has abandoned some of its more supernatural thoughts. Like you don't see folk magic anymore practiced in the church. No, nobody's using a seer stone or divining rods, and a lot of the ideas of the 19th century have been jettisoned as far as people thinking of them happening right in the here and now. They might believe they happened back then, but they don't believe they happen anymore. But and at the universities like BYU and stuff, they're not teaching that, the Big Bang and evolution didn't happen. I don't think. That's my impression, is that the professors that teach in those fields of expertise teach the data as it is written by, experts. But I do feel, and I think like my young kids, I have, mostly like kids in their young 20s and stuff. I don't think that they feel like there's conflict between religion and science for the most part. But I do think in certain areas, and we could ask Dan McClellan this when he comes on, but like biblical studies, we're woefully behind in biblical studies. We don't dare teach what biblical experts actually teach in the church because it undermines the religious theology out there. And I think that that's a danger zone, so they stay away from that. Or if it's a cultural issue like transgender issues at BYU, there's a current clampdown, on LGBT related issues at BYU, and they don't actually teach the actual data on that anymore. And in fact, I think they closed down their programs on like helping kids with speech in transgender, areas and things like that because the church just doesn't have a position they can stand on that doesn't conflict with the theology of the proclamation on the family. So they won't touch certain issues with the 10-foot pole because it's hurting their institution if they decide to do it. And the other stuff, I think they just, choose not to comment on it. You don't have Joseph Fielding Smith or any of the prophets, Ezra F. Benson, like talking about science really very much at all, if they even mention it. If they do, they sound stupid, in my opinion. So,
Yeah, it just reminded me, Cameron, that when I was at BYU, speaking of science, the evolution was the big thing, right? Not the Big Bang or physics or anything, but it was, can we teach evolution? And it was pretty much no, it was that to believe that. Well, were we really supposed to believe literally, even though it said not to believe literally, that the temple ceremony teaches us where we all came from, that Adam and Eve were through. Anyway, but that was the thing at BYU. And we left for some years, and when we came back, I just noticed that they have this, I think it's called the Bean Museum up there. It has but they have a presentation on evolution on BYU's campus. So yes, the church moves at a glacial pace, like they say, but it's forced to come around. It's forced to come around. It has with women, the issues on women. It has with, accepting at least LGBTQ, and yeah, it's just, but it makes it really hard to, at least for me, to believe anything they say. And now we go to Jackie and then Brooke.
Okay, so as a retired high school teacher, I didn't teach physics. I taught Spanish, Bruce. But I kept saying to my wife as I was reading this and cracking up, and I did go into the University of Utah as an engineering major for 3 years. So I was like all the physics and everything in the early 80s, which if I'd have had this book, I might have understood it better. And if my high schooler was if I had a high schooler, I would buy them this book.
Yeah.
I think that this book should be like it should accompany the textbooks that they're using because it's their language to begin with, like the younger people, and it just kind of speaks to them with all the drawings and everything. So that's along the lines of I think this should be a textbook. And then the other thing I was thinking about was, does the church move at a glacial pace? Yes, oftentimes too slow, even though they do change their mind, but they're usually like 50 years behind. And the space that our knowledge of the universe and the knowledge of the things that are going is just going much faster than that. We're increasing our knowledge all the time. So they're almost behind like a whole universe by the time they make this one step. And I was thinking about, do they decreased or whatever? I thought, well, during the pandemic, yeah, things did decrease because now we've gone from let's vaccinate everybody. And when I grew up in Utah, so everybody had their vaccinations and it really wasn't a big thing. And now it's like, they're like, I almost feel like some of them they became anti-vax based on the political climate at the time. And so the politics are swaying the science. And I think that's where we're going with the transgender rights as well, is that the politics are swaying the science of of how we understand transgendered individuals. And that's really sad. And I had one more point that I was thinking about. Oh, Rebecca, I think that I was saying that this book would either make you believe in God more or make you not believe in God at all. I said that to my wife when I first started reading it. And I think that if you don't have a curious mind, then you're going to believe in God more because it's just the easy way to go. But if you have a curious mind, then you're going to say the why. Like he's always going to the why. They're always going to the why in this book. Why does that happen? How does that happen? And if you're not a person to do that, then it's easier to go, oh, that's just in God's hands. And that's how we could maybe become more in. I said you'd either become a bigger believer in God or you'd become an atheist if you read this book. And so I think that it's all about the curiosity factor. And some people are more curious than others. Maybe it's a biological thing. I don't know. Why? Maybe we'll get to that at some point. And I'm older too, and I never remembered quarks and leptons and all of that in physics. Maybe it would have made this book made my life a lot easier. And at one point I said, "What is this?" to my wife. I was reading the names. I'm like, "Is this a Klingon language? Is this made up?" It just made me laugh.
It
So,
is made up by
yeah.
physicists. Yeah.
So, yeah. So that's just kind of my thought on those three things that I was keeping track of.
Very good. Yeah, I agree. I agree with all of it. And thank goodness there are curious people, right? How much progress would we have made if people had just stayed like there hadn't been the Enlightenment? They just stayed with the, oh, but it has to be how it is in the Bible. You know, that explains everything.
Yeah.
And it makes me not believe in God mostly because I think, how could a God who's so involved in all of our lives, like they teach you, and he cares about each one of us, and he's our Father, how could he why would he keep us in the dark? Why wouldn't he, or she, why would we have to still hark back to this old, and even the Book of Mormon is so Bible-y and everything. It's just like, if we have revelation, if we have prophets, where is God in that? I don't know. Okay, Brooke.
Okay, I was thinking about Rebecca's question too, like how can you read this stuff and have it strengthen your faith? And I think it goes to our brains, like their default mode is kind of to make sense of the world in light of what we already believe. And so we take it and we're like, well, that fits this way. And it reminded me of last week I was talking to my mom and she was telling me how my Uncle Dan explained to her that he doesn't believe in God because he thinks everything should make sense. And all the things about God just don't make sense to him. And she, to her, I could tell that, well, maybe, God's ways are higher than our ways. And so it doesn't have to make sense. But it got me thinking, well, religion, a lot of its foundation comes from people actually wanting the world to make sense and wanting to have an explanation. And if we can't explain it, then we come up with a story that explains it, right?
That's what religion is, isn't it? I mean, it's the story
right.
of why things are. Why are things this way? And we make up story about it.
Right. And so whether we can take information that contradicts what we already believe and be like, well, and question what we believe versus whether we can't question that and we just have to make it make sense.
Yeah.
Which direction do we make sense?
Excellent. Hey, go to the next slide, Melissa. And while we're hearing from Bruce, I just wanted to point out that these are some of the things that we have abandoned, that we could call even about the nature of the universe. And the early people that joined the church, the young people that were around Joseph Smith, like Parley B. Pratt and everything, they were speculating about all this stuff. They felt like they had this explosion of scientific knowledge, that as man is God once was, and that God created worlds without number, that, these are all the things that we have retracted in this century, I guess. The Kolob being the center of the galaxy. Our curiosity about the universe as Latter-day Saints has shrunk, I think, because we really can't. In fact, I said to Charlie, they're not going to have that hymn in the new hymn book, I'm sure, if you could hide a Kolob, which was one of I really like that hymn and the verses of it, but there is no end to matter, there is no end to race, there is no end to something, there is no end to space. I mean, anyway, does anybody else like if you could hide a Kolob? Okay, Bruce.
Yeah, some of the basic reasons I, was so interested in helping start the book club is I no longer believe in the narrative of how the world works and how people work that the church sells. So I've always wanted to know how the world works. And the science and stuff is great. I I often find myself going back and listening to Britt Hartley. We did her book No Nonsense Spirituality, and it's interesting. It just came out in audiobook. So I've got it. I've got in my little reading library, I've got it to reread it because she talks about nihilism and, how you make sense of why is it worth living, which I've never had that feeling. I have always had the feeling that, whatever I value is worth it. I think when I die, that's the end of it. But, this book, along with many of the others that we've read, just helped me understand better how the world works. And it gets farther and farther away from what the church teaches, how the world works. So that's just my thought.
Good thought. I agree. Okay, Nick, any other comments on if you could hide to collab?
I have one quick little comment. I was on a faithful Reddit sub the other day, and somebody said, have any of you ever heard that God was a man before? And you would not believe the comments. I've never heard that. I didn't know
Really?
about that. I think maybe that was something they used to mention. I think Hinckley said that was nothing, remember, decades ago.
Oh, yeah,
But
that's
the
what I'm saying.
majority of the comments, and this is a faithful
Wow.
thread because I get most of my good content over there, they didn't know about that.
Yeah.
I mean, that was it. When I think most of us were growing up, at least my age, that was absolutely it. That's what made us different. God had gone through some kind of human experience, we didn't know exactly, and we could become like that. But yeah, these guys are like,
they don't even care.
So yeah, and they didn't sound like they were that young. So I think the church is doing a good job of saying that's messy. We're not going to go there. We're not going to high school love.
People that are so faithful, I mean, it's like they wipe their memory. It's like,
oh yeah,
that they heard that. I mean, that was everywhere.
Yep.
And of
they
course
misunderstood.
I think they just,
whatever they're told to
strange.
say. And I think the steeple doctrine, that's why that was such a big deal. Whatever they're told to say, even if it never existed before that moment, it is now what they believe and what they will evangelize to the point of tears. So
yeah. Anyway, it's the mindset.
It is.
Okay. So now we're gonna I don't know where the text is in that. Modern scientific views of this is a quote from a book called This Is My Doctrine, The Development of Mormon Theology. And my husband always reminds me that all this stuff we're discussing, it's in the book. This is his book. Anyway, modern scientific views of the universe introduced by Einstein and others are vastly different from those in vogue during the early 19th century. In light of these new theories and discoveries, LDS scholar Keith Norman observes, this new scientific cosmology poses a serious challenge to the Mormon version of the universe. Next slide. This is the interesting part, though, in the next slide, Melissa, that Joseph Smith's cosmological views were not a product of revelation or those around him. They were actually in the books at the time that he read it. Secular books at the time of Joseph Smith referred to God's infinite and endless work in the creation and population of worlds when offering explanations of the universe. And that shouldn't be the period there. An 1824 textbook of geography and history asserted that God filled the universe with endless inhabited worlds. Thomas Dick's popular work, Philosophy of a Future State, and from 1829, promoted, like his earlier 1827 work, the idea of multiple inhabited worlds, and is of particular interest since it is known that the prophet actually owned a copy of that popular work, Thomas Dick's. Dick observed that the universe is made up of innumerable worlds inhabited by organized and intelligent beings, which sounds a lot like what Joseph Smith was talking about at the time. Let's go to the next slide. And I'm just going to finish this. He also believed there was a fairly conclusive evidence that all systems of the universe revolve around a common center of enormous size, which he asserted to be the location of the throne of God. He further suggested that it is from this central body that motion of every kind originates, to produce the order and harmony of the universe, in order to preserve the balance of the universal system. Today, the astronomical and cosmological views expressed in the Book of Abraham, which reflected a Newtonian world concept, are viewed by some as being largely outdated. That's a quote from This Is My Doctrine. And this is the same statement that I articulated before. If God is our Father and cares so deeply, and we have continuing revelation, why hasn't he revealed more about life, the universe, and everything, or the world, the universe, and everything? Okay. Next slide, and then we'll go to Bruce.
Yeah, the author of This Is My Gospel is really a brilliant man.
And he has
and your husband.
and he has wonderful
Now say something
taste
nice
in
about
women.
Landon, Charlie.
Landon, I'll pay you afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Bruce.
Yeah, well, just you know, I was coming home last night listening to the last chapter and talking, when they did, what is it? A stop clock is right a couple times a day. Innumerable worlds does seem to be kind of correct, inhabited by, people like us, probably not. But it is interesting how, the Book of Mormon is 18th century beliefs put down as scripture,
Sure.
and really nothing more, and stuff. So just my thought.
Good. Cameron?
Yeah, we'll probably get into this more in the John Turner book, which I'm looking forward to now that I signed up for that. But I think everything that Joseph produced around this was clearly in the milieu at the time, and whether he was directly borrowing from a book that he was reading, or he was hearing this around him from the preachers that he was listening to and the newspapers and everything that was going on. It was clearly in the 19th century. But what's interesting to me is this apologetic is still constantly used by the current apologists for the church. And I still attend. I'm still a member. I'm not anti church. I just am deconstructed. But I hear it all the time, like, oh, Joseph couldn't have known this. I was listening to the Scripture Central podcast for most of this year just to complement my D&C study, and that was constantly a comment. They would say Joseph is a product of his environment to some extent, but there's no way he could have known this. But then we find evidence that he knows it. I mean, Ganesh's new book is all about stuff that's going on during Joseph Smith's production of the Book of Mormon, the D&C, and everything. Like, eventually we can find evidence for pretty much all the ideas that Joseph comes up with in his milieu in the 19th century. He's a normal human. I guess I'm a cold-hearted atheist at some level, because I don't believe people can just produce something from some external source that is just like completely independent of everything else humans could ever know. Like, so it to me, that's just natural. There's a natural explanation for all of what we get in Mormonism and what Joseph produced. It's not supernatural in origin, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yep. Bravo. Yeah. Oh, it is. That's how that was my shelf breaker thing is I read the Book of Mormon one last time, and to me, I just couldn't get rid of it. It sounded like an 18th century 19th century document. I thought it can't be historical. And I told that to my bishop in a temple recommend interview, and he wouldn't renew my temple recommend. He said, you got to figure that out. He took it away.
Can I just add into that? Because I agree that, you can't operate outside, what or it doesn't seem reasonable. But then I look at guys like Einstein and I just go, how did he come up with that stuff that just seemed to be so far out of every other human? There seems to be there seems to be just a handful of people who could just pull things out that no one else could even conceive of. And that to me is more prophecy than the prophets, when I see someone like him.
Yeah, there's geniuses. I'm humanities, so I think of Mozart. How could he write these things when he was a little kid? But really, back to the Einstein thing. There's a book that I'm going to get a hold of that I just heard about. I just read about it, and it kind of gets rid of that myth, Landon, that Einstein was and Einstein and Newton and all the guys that we kind of this is the figure that we remember for the invention of Newtonian physics and so forth. But he's like the figurehead. But really, it was all over. And Charles Darwin, the same thing, right? That theory was in the air, was in the science of the time. But they're the ones that articulated it in such a way that they get, and I think Einstein, the same thing. I read one book that said that all the mathematics equations were done by his wife, who was a mathematician. Einstein's anyway. So
I think he gave her all the money from his Nobel Prize, I think.
Yeah. Well,
they got divorced or something, and he gave her all the money that was the divorce
he
decree.
probably should have gotten it. No, I don't know. Okay, who's next? Kevin? Kevin? Go ahead, Kevin.
Okay, yeah, I was just going to kind of piggyback on some of the comments from Cameron about Joseph Smith. And I have this theory about Joseph Smith that he kind of was scared of the unknown and not knowing and not having the answers. And so he would try and get all the information he can, either from, his brother from Dartmouth or from, Rigdon and all these other people that were coming into his life and kind of getting the pieces of theology and everything for them and piece them all together in what has become Mormonism. That, like, I just look at him as just wanting to know what the truth was and not having all the answers. And so trying to find all this and then, rattling them around in his own mind to come up with an explanation that made sense to him. And then he would just say, hey, this is what it is, rather than, still leave open for the possibility that, he was wrong or incorrect or whatever. And so all these times that he's, doubling down and tripling down on these mistakes that he's made is because he just can't admit that he doesn't have all the answers.
That's a good point. Even the John Turner book that everybody's talking about. What you're articulating, at least what I'm hearing, Kevin, is that at least he was good at something, right? He was curious and he was good at collaborating and pulling stuff together because he wanted to know. I think
Yeah.
John Turner is a never Mormon, but he is kind of awed by Joseph Smith himself. I mean, he definitely was, he's one of those figures in history that you can't
Yeah, and
really
I
explain.
believe he was very much a brilliant man that
Yes.
was really good at certain things.
Mhm.
And yeah, he made plenty of mistakes along the way, but like there's a lot of um, good stuff that has kind of come out of what he has done. And, not that it overshadows all the bad that he did, but I think that there is some, little nuggets of inspiration or whatever that we can get from him about some of the way he, tackled some opposition, but also, learning from the mistakes he's done and, changing them and doing them a little bit different.
He certainly is, and I'm glad you stuck up for him a little bit. We tend to go the other way a lot, but yeah, but you can't get past whether and think of all of the books that have been written and that people continually still study the revelations and the books that he produced. He was one of a kind, for sure. Rebecca.
Yeah, I think once you realize it's not God, it's not anything like that, then you have to look at a human being that could accomplish that. And it's true. And if you look at John Turner, like you said, he looked at it objectively, and Joseph Smith was one of a kind. But I wanted to mention, based on what Cameron, Landon, and Kevin all said, this idea of Joseph being aware of so many things, so many cutting edge things. And I think it's not talked about a lot, but it will start to be talked about more, and that's the Erie Canal. Landon and I have done a couple episodes on this where I don't think people realize, and it sounds like a cliche, the internet of its day, but that's exactly what it was. You have major cities, people, ideas, concepts coming, information flooding from the cities through those people down this canal, and they stop everywhere. And Palmyra itself had 3 different ports, little stops where the people would get out, books were exchanged. They had floating libraries. People would talk about religion. You know, that was kind of the Beyonce concert of the day, as John Lenville likes to say. So this information, and we're talking real time, cutting edge from the big city, is flowing down through the Erie Canal. And, you know, Joseph and his family had a beer and cake stand right there, you know, on the shores of the Erie Canal right there. So I think that's something that we need to look more into, because that explains a lot about such a variety of information and the excitement over information. And like you said, Kevin, just, I think Joseph realizing there's so much I don't know. I need to know more, and I've got to have these answers. And he was a sponge. So I predict, you know, that this Erie Canal angle is going to become more of a big deal. Now, on the faithful side, when they talk about the Erie Canal, they say it allowed workers to travel more easily to Palmyra to like build the press. You know, the pieces of the actual press came down the canal, so it did bring forth the Book of Mormon. But they don't ever really mention this huge transfer of information and ideas and that kind of stuff that's coming out. So I think I'm a fan of the Erie Canal. Let's just say that. And I think more people will start talking about it.
I agree. So Rebecca, just remind me, I think I heard about it first on Mormonish podcast. Who was the original guy you had talking about?
Doug Vincent. And I
so
came
give a
across
shout
a
out to
post.
Doug Vincent.
Yeah, he did an episode on the Backyard Professor years ago. And I saw someone mention that, and I had to dig in, and he goes, yeah, I've still got my slideshow. So, you know, we put a couple episodes out. Jim Smith also talked about transportation and archaeology in the Erie Canal. And what's really funny is that at Sunstone, when Randy and RFM were giving a presentation, they go, and we have something big coming down the pike, something new, you know, that no one's ever talked about.
Oh, it's not
the
new.
Erie Canal.
Yeah.
And Landon and I are just like, we get it. We get it. We put stuff out, and, you know, but it's great though. It needs to be talked about in bigger, broader circles, because I think it's just one of those data points that everyone's like, oh, of course. I mean, floating library barges where you can borrow books and real-time information coming from the big city. I think it is a big deal, especially given Joseph's personality. So yeah, those were great episodes. The Erie Canal, such a good one with Doug Vincent.
And wasn't that an example of what we were just talking about?
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
About how, like, who was the first one to come up with it? Was it Rebecca? Was it Doug? Was it, you know, it doesn't matter, right?
It doesn't matter. It
but
should be out there.
Somebody will get credit for it, but who cares?
Yeah,
anyway,
it doesn't matter.
So I'm done with my presentation. I just have the final statement there, and I'm sure you've been able to read it, but I'll go back to it. But just to say, this is from the book, a quote, but the journey of the human race to understand our universe is far from over, and you get to be a part of it. It's exciting. It's the appeal to authority to say that, well, the prophet and the people that I'm neighbors with and that I walk with and everything, that's how they answer everything. Well, we don't have to worry. We just have to obey and follow. But what's the fun of that? Be curious, right? And that's the end of we have no idea.
Be curious is the greatest thing you could ever say. And I think a lot of us are here in the book club or where we are in life right now because we were curious, right? We no longer just wanted to take answers from somebody else, and we wanted to just try to figure things out, and led a lot of us down a path with a lot of consequences, right? That's how it is. So I think, first of all, Yvonne, yay. I mean, that was a hard book, you know, but you presented it in a really accessible way, which was really good. So, and if y'all didn't have a chance to finish it, seriously, you know, and you have the hard copy, that even just scrolling through and reading the cartoons and the little blurbs around them. Yeah, it's a real, like I said, I wish this was my 9th grade science book. That would have been really a lot better, a lot less of a headache. So you did a fantastic job as usual. We appreciate you as a book club member. You're always awesome. So that was great. So our next book, and I don't know if Landon saw my text, but I said, Landon, I talk too much. You preview our next book. So if you didn't, it's like being at the church where the bishop goes, and we'd like to call Landon Brophy up. We have some extra time. Would you, as the second counsel, like to fill in? And you're like, I was in a ward where they flat out said, next Sunday, anyone can be called up. Anybody from a child, age 8, any adult, we're going to just call people randomly up. And, you know, I was attending in Faithful. I would not go. I was so petrified and terrified that somehow it would be me, because I did not like to speak. I was super shy in church, but they did. And they called up little kids, and they called, you know, I just like, good.
They
Great.
probably had the lowest attendance they'd ever had.
I feel like they must. Yeah, who's going to go for that? Oh my gosh, I know. So anyway, so yes, Landon, you're being called. So our
Okay.
next book is, I think we have a slide on it. Here it is, Dictates of Conscience. This is going to be
Sorry, I'm
amazing.
trying to get it
Oh,
out.
it's okay,
It's
Melissa,
working.
you're fine. And as we said at the beginning, if some of you weren't here, Laura Lee Hall is going to be here with us. So Landon and I aren't really leading the discussion. We're just kind of introducing her, and then we can, ask questions and all of that. And I said at the beginning, if you do have, friends or anybody that would be interested in interacting with Laura Lee, please just invite them. Do some missionary work. So yeah. Ooh, wicked. I like that. I wish we were all.
Sorry.
It's okay, Melissa.
Doing
I'll
two.
hold the book up.
We're
Switching
not
between
reading
two
Wicked.
webcams.
Go ahead, Landon. I wish we were
Oh,
going to
goodness.
Wicked. Wouldn't that be amazing if we announced everyone at book club? We've got tickets for everyone. We're gonna. Oh my, that would be incredible. That would be amazing. Okay, go ahead, Landon. Just tell us about Laura Lee. We've had the chance to interview her before, so yeah, she's. Whew, you did it, Melissa.
Yeah, if you haven't heard of Dictates of Conscience or read the book, it's very interesting because Laura Lee Hall was the church architect for temples. She designed many of the temples, the locations where they would be, whatnot. But she did that when she was a man, and at the time she was also a stake president, a sitting stake president. And so the story of her life and how things changed, the interaction, she got to sit down with many of the Quorum of the 12, and to have her story told as to, who in the Quorum of the 12 had some empathy towards her and who had not so much empathy towards her is extremely interesting. And just to see her life of someone who had the priesthood and now all of a sudden does not have the priesthood, and the struggle that she went through trying to find out who she was and what her real self was, and then how did she decide to deal with those things once she started accepting those, and then some of the burdens and the rules that were put upon her to keep her from being who she felt that she really was. So anyway, very interesting book. I don't think you'll find any story like this anywhere else. Someone who was this high up in the church, who had so many different experiences from being a man to being a woman, how it just completely changes who you are in your relationship with God, as well as as a human being when you in that change. So very fascinating book. And with Laura Lee coming, she can really tell a story, and very intelligent person, and just is full of stories of how her life was impacted by this. So uh, everyone should tune in on this one.
Yeah, and thank you, Lennon. And she's really excited to come talk to us. I mean, we love to talk to her. We've interviewed her twice, once about her story, but then we are like, well, you got to come on and just talk about being the temple architect. I mean, independent of the rest of the story, because the things that she did and knew and worked on and working with the brethren, that in itself is fascinating. It's all kind of wrapped up into one. So like I said, do some missionary work on this. If anybody else wants to, meet with her and come to the meeting, I think that would be fantastic. So anyway, 10 a.m. Sunday, September 14th. We're going to start with our new schedule. Very quickly. Yes.
10 a.m. 10 a.m. Mountain time.
Yep. I should say
9 a.m.
time.
Pacific for those of us on the West Coast, and then adjust however it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's a change,
It is a little bit of a change, but I think it'll be helpful to our Central and East Coast, who is smack dab in the middle of the afternoon. So we'll see. I mean, we'll see if people are not happy with this, and we might change it. But for now, we're going to try it based on user feedback. And that's it. So more in the media. I think Melissa had a little slide on that. Just that the Good Book Club podcast, you can listen to it on audio. It's always there. You can find it wherever you find your regular podcast. We have our YouTube channel where you can actually watch with the slides. And that's by searching the Good Book Club for Post-Mormons. We have the Good Media Club. That's a Facebook page where we throw things on there having to do with Mormonism and the media. And of course, Landon and I have Mormonish podcasts where we talk about a lot of the topics we talk in book club. And also we have a lot of people from book club on the podcast. So that's kind of fun. And you can find that on audio or video wherever you want. If you would like to connect with the Good Book Club if you're not a member, right? If you don't so much like social media, which I don't blame you at all, you can send an email to thegoodbookclub@mail.com. We'll put you on our email list. You can get links and information that way. If you do that, sometimes my answers go to spam, so make sure you check your spam folder. You can also find us on Facebook. That's where we post a lot of things. We're also on Instagram. I think I need to find a post-Mormon teenager to help me with all my social media. That's true. So at this point, we'll say thank you again, Yvonne, and thank you, everybody, and we'll officially end the recorded part of the meeting.